I just finished making 16 servings of food with less than 90 minutes of hands-on time. I'm gonna show you how I did it. Each of these 4 recipes makes 4 servings, so by the end of the 90 minutes, plus a little bit of wait time from the slow cooker, you'll have 16 meals for the week. And some of them will freeze beautifully in case you want to save a few servings for another week. So let's get started. First up, we're going to throw something in the slow cooker. If you don't have a slow cooker, you can definitely make this on the stove in a large pot, but that will take up a burner on your stove and a little bit more hands-on time, so we're using the slow cooker. There's a very small amount of prep required. First, we'll chop up half an onion. I'm using a red onion here just for some polyphenols this week. We'll also finely mince a few cloves of garlic and then mince up 2 jalapenos. I usually remove the seeds from one of the jalapenos and leave the seeds in the other one, but if you like it spicy, leave all the seeds in, or if you don't like it spicy, you can remove all the seeds. Next, we will drain and rinse 2 cans of white beans. I'm using lightly salted beans here. And finally, we will juice 2 limes. Now we're gonna add all of the ingredients to the slow cooker. I like to put the chicken closer to the bottom to ensure it's covered by the salsa, then add the white beans, chopped onions, garlic, and jalapenos, a jar or about 12 to 14 ounces of salsa verde, and a bit of chicken broth. I'm using chicken bone broth I defrosted from my freezer, but you can use store-bought, and the lime juice. Now, in a totally linear timeline, you're gonna let this cook for about 3 hours on high while you prepare the other dishes for the week. But for the sake of this video, we will fast forward to when the soup is ready. So once the chicken is fully cooked after about 3 hours, remove it from the slow cooker and shred it into small pieces, then add it back to the slow cooker along with about 1 bag of frozen spinach. If you're serving this right away, you can just put the lid on and let that cook another 10 to 20 minutes so the spinach can thaw and the chicken can absorb more flavor. But if you're making this for meal prep, here is a tip. The frozen spinach will actually help the soup to cool much more quickly, so I'm gonna just remove the soup from the slow cooker and add the frozen spinach, stir that together, and let the spinach thaw and come to temperature while also cooling the soup at the same time. At this point, your soup is ready, but we're also gonna serve this with crispy tortilla strips. You can choose to make these today, or you can throw them together later in the week when you're ready to serve the soup. I'm going to prepare these on a sheet pan and set them aside until we're ready to use the oven. So go ahead and chop your tortillas into small bite-sized pieces, toss them with some oil, salt, and pepper on a parchment-lined baking sheet, and then we'll just set that aside until the oven is on for another recipe later. If you want to save time, you can definitely use store-bought tortilla strips or just regular old tortilla chips, but I do really like the texture of these homemade ones. And that's it for recipe number 1. For our second recipe, we're making this delicious Thai-style red lentil curry with rice. This dish is really creamy from coconut milk, and it gets a lot of its flavor from the store-bought Thai red curry paste. To save a little bit on time, we're using white rice here because it cooks faster than brown rice, but you can use whatever rice you prefer. You can rinse this and then just cook it according to your package instructions. I'm adding 1 cup of white basmati rice to my rice cooker along with about 1 cup of water and 3/4 cups of chicken bone broth. You can totally use all water here if you'd like. I just had a little bit of bone broth left over from the first recipe, so we're gonna use that here. Plus, cooking your rice in bone broth is a pro move. It tastes amazing. Next, to prepare the aromatics, aka the flavor powerhouses, I'll dice half a yellow onion, grate 2 tablespoons of frozen ginger, and then mince or grate 2 cloves of garlic. We'll also prep all the other vegetables now as well. I'll remove the stem and seeds from the red bell pepper and slice it pretty thinly. Peel the carrots and carefully slice them on your mandolin. You can grate this if you'd prefer, or just cut it with a knife. And then finally, after removing the stems from the kale, we will wash it and roughly chop it. You can set all of these vegetables aside. To start cooking, bring a wide, deep-sided skillet or Dutch oven to medium-high heat. Melt the coconut oil, then saute the onions with a pinch of salt just until they're starting to soften. Next, we'll add the ginger, garlic, tomato paste, curry paste, and red pepper flakes. We'll give this a stir. Some brands of Thai red curry paste are much spicier than others, so if you've got a really spicy one, maybe from your local Asian market, you can start by adding a little bit less. but if you've got a really generic one from the grocery store, you may find that you even want to add a little bit more. If you're worried about your Thai red curry paste being too spicy, maybe you haven't tried it before, you can totally wait to add the red pepper flakes until the end, or just skip them altogether. Cook this together for about 1 minute, stirring constantly to make sure nothing burns to the bottom. Then we'll add the red lentils, coconut milk, and a little water or broth. Stir this well to combine, then go ahead and add in the bell peppers and the carrots. You're gonna simmer this uncovered for 15 to 20 minutes or until the lentils are fully cooked and essentially melted into the liquid. You'll want to stir this pretty often just to make sure it's cooking evenly and not sticking to the bottom. Once the lentils are done, we will add the washed and chopped kale. I do prefer my lentils to be super soft in this recipe, so just before adding in the kale, I'll often add a little bit more water. Then I'll add the kale and cover it with a lid to allow the kale to steam for about 3 minutes. Then we'll remove the lid, stir it super well, and check the consistency and flavor. You may have to add a little more salt here. Stir in the juice of half a lime and you're ready to go. When it's serving time, I like to serve the curry with the rice, garnished with a little cilantro and a lime wedge. But since we're doing a meal prep video, you can just set this aside to cool while we work on the next recipe. For the next recipe, we're making one of my all-time favorites, miso meatball lettuce wraps with pickled vegetables. This one does have a lot more steps than the other recipes in this meal plan, but I do think it's really important to have variety in your meal prep, which is why I usually include one recipe that might be a little bit more complicated, but also a little more exciting. First up, we'll make the quick pickled vegetables. I'm using carrots and spring red radish. You can also use daikon radish here if it's easier for you to find. Peel the carrots and carefully slice them on your mandolin. You can also choose to julienne them with a julienne peeler or even cut them into matchsticks, but I find the mandolin to be the easiest option for me. Be sure to protect your hands while using the mandolin though. We will also cut the spring radishes in the same way, but since they're so small, I'm always going to use the protective handle. Add the carrots and radishes to a jar. Then we'll add about half a cup of vinegar. I'm also adding a tablespoon of maple syrup. Sugar or honey are both fine here, before just covering them with boiling water. Close the jar with a lid and set it aside at room temperature to pickle. I usually leave them on the counter for an hour and then give the jar a shake before storing it in the fridge. Now let's make the miso meatballs. To do this, we will chop up some green onions, saving some of those green tops for a garnish later if you'd like. Grate some frozen ginger and mince or grate 2 cloves of garlic. Did you know that the word in Spanish for garlic clove is diente de ajo, which roughly translates to garlic tooth? We're gonna mix the meatball mixture together in a large bowl, so add the ground turkey, ginger and garlic, green onions, miso paste, sesame oil, red pepper flakes, and soy sauce or tamari to a large bowl, and mix this well with a spatula or your hands. Then we'll scoop these out into 1.5 tablespoon sized meatballs. I'm gonna place mine on a parchment lined baking sheet and then bake them in the preheated oven until they're fully cooked. Chicken or turkey meatballs of this size will usually take about 10 to 12 minutes, whereas beef or pork meatballs will usually take closer to 15 to 18 minutes. If you want, as soon as the meatballs are done, you can drop the temperature of the oven down to 400 degrees Fahrenheit so that you can go ahead and cook those crispy tortilla strips. Meanwhile, we will make the vermicelli rice noodles. We're just gonna add these rice noodles to a casserole dish and cover with boiling water. Stir them a little bit just to make sure they're not sticking together, and just let them sit in the hot water for about 3 minutes, or based on the instructions on your package of noodles. Then just drain the noodles and toss them with a little bit of sesame oil to prevent them from sticking together. You can also use this time to wash and dry whatever lettuce you're using for the lettuce wraps, or you can wait to do this until serving day. Now that we have our meatballs, quick pickled vegetables, vermicelli rice noodles, and lettuce wraps, we can package this up for lunches during the week. You can choose to eat this hot or cold. Okay, we are on to our final recipe. This one is probably the easiest, and I have made it on this channel before because we've actually just been making this for over a decade and it's on regular rotation in our house. We're making my 1-pan chickpeas with coconut and tomatoes. This dish is really creamy, but the flavors are pretty simple, so feel free to amp up the chili and garlic or add other spices that you might prefer. I'm gonna start with canned chickpeas that have been drained and rinsed, so I'll add those to a medium pot along with 1 can of diced tomatoes and 1 can of coconut milk. For additional flavor, I usually like to use a chili garlic sauce like sambal ulik, but I didn't have any on hand, so we're just using chili paste and garlic powder with a few pinches of salt. Let that simmer, partially covered, for about 20 minutes. Meanwhile, we're gonna prepare some noodles. I prefer this dish with noodles, but Zach does prefer it with rice. So you could always make a larger batch of rice if you'd like, but in the interest of time and a little bit of diversity, we're gonna do the noodles today. I'm actually using shirataki noodles, which take just 3 minutes to rehydrate in hot water. If you can't find them, Korean glass noodles are very similar. You can also use any other noodles here. I like rice noodles, and I also like flat edamame noodles, which are a great option for a little extra protein if you can find them. After the dish has been cooking for about 20 minutes, you can give it a stir and then add about 8 ounces of frozen chopped spinach. We'll let this cook for another 5, maybe 10 minutes or so, just until the spinach is fully thawed and integrated into the dish. Now again, just like the salsa verde soup, which was our first recipe, if you're making this for meal prep, you can remove this from the heat when you add the spinach to help it cool faster. Now you're ready to serve this or store it. And just like that, you've got 16 servings of food ready for you this week. And we even had a couple of minutes left at the end. I think one of the challenges when it comes to cooking for yourself at home or meal prepping is that you're starting from scratch every single time, trying to read a recipe, make sure you have all the ingredients, and it does take quite a lot of mental attention to actually do that. So if you can, you want to include at least one dish that's really simple that you don't even have to think about. The 1-pan coconut and tomato chickpeas is definitely that dish for me. Start with whatever works for you. Do you already have something that you don't even have to think about to put together? I would definitely include that or variations on that dish in your meal prep. Once I've got all of my meals prepped for the week, I do like to take a look at my schedule and figure out which meals we're having for lunch or dinner on which days. This helps remove decision making and decision fatigue on the weeks when I'm really busy, and also helps me make sure I've got the right food for the right scenario and I don't have any food waste. So for example, if I'm not gonna have access to a microwave one day for lunch, I'll want the lettuce wraps on that day rather than something that is much better hot, like one of these other stew or soup options. I do recommend including at least one dish that can be frozen and planning to eat that a little later in the week. That way, if you're getting sort of sick of your homemade meals for whatever reason, or some type of an event comes up and you want to go eat out, you have the flexibility to do that without wasting food or money. You can just freeze those meals for another week. I hope this quick and easy meal prep gives you some great ideas to help make your week a little easier. Thanks as always for being here, and I'll see you in the next video. Okay, Zach, which one do you want to eat for lunch?
This one.
Miso meatballs? Miso meatball lettuce wraps?
Yep. Okay, I can't wait to have a bite of this panini. This is one whole meatball in your mouth?
No. I've also... And this is my last video in our apartment in Tallinn, so say goodbye to our cute little apartment here in Tallinn, Estonia.